Ernst, thank you very much for agreeing to speak to us. First things first, what's happening in South Africa? We've seen what Donald Trump did. We saw that White House Oval Office situation. We've since been told repeatedly by various media outlets that that wasn't the whole story, that he was exaggerating slight things. From the horse's mouth, we'd like to hear it. What's the truth of the situation regarding farmers in South Africa?
Well, thank you, firstly, for speaking with me about this, but also I think that what Donald Trump did there was quite spectacular because, in a sense, he just picked up a mirror and he just said to the world, this is what's happening in South Africa. And he wasn't even putting it into his own words, he was just playing the videos. And so now there are people trying to downplay it, but you can't. The videos were not fake videos. It's actually happening, these rallies where people chant, kill the Boer, kill the farmer, and so forth. And those crosses, those memorials for the victims of farm attacks are really there. I've been to them. And so we are very grateful. We are very sad about the problem and the crisis, and it needs to be addressed. But we are very grateful that people are talking about the crisis and that the world is starting to take note. But what we are very concerned about is how some people in the media within South Africa and in America are, probably because they don't like Donald Trump or something, trying to downplay the problem, pretend that it doesn't exist, when you can't ignore the extent of the crisis, when you actually have the names of the people who have been murdered, when you can list the race laws, you can see them on a list, you can count them and see there are more than 140. You can look at the legislation, the laws that the South African government has written and that has been signed by the South African president saying we want to expropriate private property without compensation. It's a reality, and it's good that people are talking about this because we need to apply as much pressure as we can.
Now, you as a filmmaker, you've recently been to America, and it would appear that that has played a rather large part in getting the ball rolling, so that after decades of nobody really paying any attention to South Africa, it seems now that possibly you've turned a corner. And now, all of a sudden, South Africa is featuring more and more in the news. And it's not only the YouTube channels, it's not only the minor, less important media, but the mainstream media seem to be paying attention now. I mean, is that wholly down to you?
Well, no, it's certainly down to a variety of factors. So this is my, I think, fourth time speaking at CPAC Hungary. And what's remarkable is, I remember the first time coming here, we were very grateful for the invitation. And I remember coming to CPAC in, was it 2022, I think was the first one, and speaking to people, and they would be very surprised that there's someone from South Africa, and they would ask, how are things in South Africa? And you would have to explain to them, and they didn't know. Now, fast forward to this year, is everyone knows about what's happening in South Africa. Everyone I speak with saw that meeting in the White House. Everyone is concerned about South Africa. And so there was certainly a shift, a massive shift, regarding the narrative about South Africa. And we are very grateful about that. And I think a lot of people have played a role in achieving that. But places, conferences like CPAC, allowing people to talk about what's happening in South Africa, have played a big role. There are other conferences as well, NatCon and so forth. And our friends abroad, and also people, and this rise in alternative media, people doing interviews like this and publishing it on their platforms, and up to a point where the problem, it's not possible to ignore it anymore. And it's gotten to a point where the President of the United States started paying attention to this. And when Donald Trump says this is a problem, you can't ignore it, you have to talk about it. So again, we're not happy about the problem, we want the problem to be solved. But given that the problem is there, we are very grateful that light is being shined on the problem so that it can apply pressure towards a solution.
Now, we noticed that, or we heard from Donald Trump that he's prepared, or he's offered essentially a chance for white South African farmer families to relocate to the States. He would like to see them there. He says, okay, these are good people, these are Christian people, these are hardworking people. The last number I saw, I'm not sure if it's up to date, but there was 50 families who took him up on this offer. Is there a possibility that this will open up a new chapter? Are we likely to see something being offered from Holland, for example, given the obvious strong historical ties, and is that a good thing potentially, or is that a bad thing? Do you want people to stay in South Africa? Do you understand why they want to leave? It's obviously quite a complex question.
Yes, so both. Let's firstly say about Holland. we are actually quite sad about the extent to which we've been neglected, or you might even say rejected by the Dutch. We have some very good friends in the Netherlands, for which we are very grateful. But you could say the Dutch establishment has sort of forgotten about the Afrikaner people, presumably deliberately so. And hopefully we can change that, and hopefully our friends in the Netherlands can help to change that. And so the refugee issue is a sort of a bittersweet moment for us. The sweet part is the fact that there's so much attention on the crisis, and you need to shed light on a crisis to be able to solve it, this type of crisis at least. The bitter part is what we actually want is a future in South Africa, because we've lived there for hundreds of years, 400 years. My great-great-grandparent with the Roots surname, of whom I descend directly, came to South Africa he was just a little bit older than George Washington. And so he moved to South Africa when, we believe it was when George Washington was a teenager. So my family has been in South Africa for as long as the United States has been a country. And now to simply say there's a problem, we need to go somewhere else, is a very, very tragic thing. And so some people have experienced trauma, like they have been in farm attacks. Some people have been pushed out, or they can't get a job because of the race laws. And it's good if there's an outcome for people like that. But what was also good about this meeting in the White House is the fact that it forces the South African government, whether they will take up this pressure or not is a different question, but it has applied a lot of pressure on them to move towards some form of a solution within South Africa. And so our position on that is the only solution I think that is sustainable is not just some tweaks in legislation here and there, but to rethink the political system of South Africa and to move towards a system that is much more decentralized and in which the different nations living in South Africa can govern themselves. So it's very comparable to the European Union debate, because Europe is a big territory with different nations living within, and South Africa is a big territory with different nations living within it. And these nations should be able to govern themselves and not just be governed by one group applying all these race laws to them.
Right, but I mean, that is a huge task, obviously. Yeah. I mean, this is not something that can be achieved in 10 minutes. So looking at that huge task and just facing up to it, do you feel positive? How do you feel about going ahead?
Well, so the Afrikaners are a small nation. The Hungarians are bigger than the Afrikaners, but it's still a small nation compared to others. And the thing about small nations is you have some disadvantages, that you don't have as much power as big nations do. But the one advantage to being a small nation is every crisis you face is an existential crisis, and that's why you take it very seriously. And so every crisis is you have to respond as if it's a fight for survival. Right. And so for us it is a fight for survival. And if you approach a crisis like that, then I'm slightly more optimistic that we will reach an outcome. And I'm not trying to be utopian or anything like that. And I certainly don't think it will be easy, and I certainly don't think it will happen quickly. But there is growing support within South Africa, within the different communities or nations in South Africa and all over the world, for this idea that the problem in South Africa is the system. South Africa was a globalist experiment of the 90s and it failed. And the only way forward is to sort of reverse this very destructive experiment that was applied on South Africa. And now there are people saying, oh, so that's actually the apartheid system you want to bring back. If self-governance is apartheid, then the world has been applying apartheid throughout the ages, because the world is politics since the Greeks were based on the idea that people should be able to govern themselves. And that's what we need to promote in South Africa. And I think it's not something that we're going to achieve tomorrow, but we're getting more and more support from all over the world. We're not going to convince the ANC, certainly not, but you don't need to convince those in power that the system has to change. Sometimes the winds of change is just so strong. Like no one expected that, we have to convince the National Party that the apartheid system would have to end. It got to a point where they didn't have a choice. Right. And so I think we are moving in that direction in South Africa.
Excellent. Ernst, thank you very much for the interview.
Thank you for speaking.
Ernst Rost, positive, looking forward to the future. All the best.
Thank you.
Good luck to you, Ernst.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.